Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic today that never seems to get old.
It really doesn't.
The JFK assassination.
Oh, yeah. Always a good one.
Decades later, and it still has people captivated.
It's true.
And we've got a ton of newly released documents to unpack.
We do.
So we're talking witness testimonies, photos, even audio recordings.
All kinds of
A
stuff.
lot to dig through.
Yeah, and what makes this really interesting is we're not actually trying to solve the case ourselves.
Right.
We're looking at the work of the Assassination Records Review Board, or ARRB.
The ARB.
Yeah, so instead of another JFK conspiracy theory, we're going behind the scenes.
Okay, like it.
On how we even get this information.
So, like, the process,
Yeah.
not the crime itself.
Right.
I'm into it.
This board, the ARRB, they had a huge job
I bet.
finding and releasing all government records related to the assassination.
All of them.
All of them. Millions of pages. Just imagine.
And that must force some serious transparency.
Oh, absolutely. It was a level we hadn't really seen before.
And their goal wasn't to find out who killed Kennedy.
No, their mission was just to make sure the public had access to everything,
Everything.
no matter how small. They reviewed almost 4 million pages of records.
4 million.
4 million.
That's a lot of paper.
It is. They interviewed key figures, and they even had to fight to get some agencies to cooperate.
Oh, really? So some people weren't so keen on sharing.
Not exactly.
That's interesting.
Makes you think, right?
It does. Okay, 4 million pages. That's going to be more than just one person stamping papers all day.
It was a whole team.
Were there any, like, standout people on the ARRB, super dedicated, went above and beyond?
Definitely. 2 names you'll see a lot are Jeremy Gunn and Douglas Horn.
Write those down, folks.
They were really relentless in tracking down records and interviewing people.
Sounds like my kind of people.
And we also have insights from Dr. Anna Nelson.
Oh, I've heard of her.
She served on the board. She's talked about how tedious a lot of the work was. Yeah, I bet. But they were committed to leaving no stone unturned.
That's dedication.
It is.
Okay, but let's be real. After 35 years, how reliable can these witnesses even be?
That's a great question.
I can barely remember what I had for breakfast.
Right. You bring up a really important point.
Do I?
Yeah, even in the best cases, eyewitness testimony is tricky.
Oh, I know.
Memories change, they fade, they get mixed up.
Yeah.
And they can even be influenced by things you hear or read later on.
Oh, for sure.
Now, try to get accurate memories from someone 35 years after a huge, shocking event.
Yikes. Yeah, not easy.
Not at all.
So even if someone is being totally honest,
Yeah.
their memory might just be wrong.
It happens all the time.
How do you even sort through that?
It's one of the biggest challenges with historical research.
I bet.
There's a story about a doctor who treated JFK at Parkland Hospital.
Parkland, right?
And he clearly remembered Jackie Kennedy wearing a white dress,
Okay.
but she was actually wearing a pink suit.
Wait, what? If a doctor
I know, right?
gets that wrong,
It makes you wonder.
it really does.
And Jeremy Gunn, who we mentioned before,
Yeah, the records guy.
he talked about how even well-meaning witnesses had really unreliable memories.
So you're saying, like, even the people who wanted to help
Exactly.
might have gotten things mixed up.
It happens.
Wow.
And another researcher, Harrison Livingstone,
Okay.
he was actually worried that new theories and research might be affecting the memories of people the ARRB interviewed.
You mean like stuff they read after the fact could be changing their memories of what they saw?
That's the idea, yeah.
That's a little creepy.
It is kind of unsettling.
It makes you wonder how much of anything we can trust.
It's a good question to keep in mind.
Okay, so we've got unreliable witnesses, and I'm guessing now we're getting into all the conspiracy stuff, like grassy knolls and all that.
Well, it's important to separate the types of conspiracy.
Oh, there are types.
There are. Jeremy Gunn from the ARRB, he had a good way of explaining it.
Okay, lay it on me.
He said there's the legal definition, which is just 2 or more people planning something illegal.
Okay, that makes sense.
He called that small c conspiracy.
Small.
And then there's capital C conspiracy, which is like the belief in hidden, powerful forces controlling everything.
Ooh, spooky.
Right. Often without any real proof.
Okay, so like someone handing Oswald a lucky rabbit's foot before he shot Kennedy.
Exact.
That'd be a small c.
Perfect example.
Got it. So why is that distinction important?
Because with JFK, there's so much circumstantial evidence.
There is.
Oh, yeah. And you can use it to create all sorts of different stories.
So, like, you could make an argument for Castro being behind it, or the KGB,
You could, yeah.
or, like, the CIA,
Yep.
even LBJ.
It's been done.
Wow. Okay, so that's the problem with the JFK assassination.
In a nutshell.
Too much information, maybe.
It can be, yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean we're getting closer to the truth.
Sometimes it just makes things murkier.
So how are we supposed to handle all this? As listeners, I mean...
That's the tricky part, right?
Yeah. Especially if we can't even trust the witnesses.
You got to think critically.
Oh, good advice.
We have to understand the different standards of proof.
Proof.
Like what's needed in a legal case versus what we can expect with historical events.
Oh, that's a good point.
In court, you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt to convict someone.
Right.
But in history, we almost never have that kind of certainty.
So you're saying, like, even with all the evidence the ARRB found,
Yeah.
a jury might not have convicted Oswald.
It's possible, yeah.
Wow. That makes you think, right?
It really does. Okay, so we've got iffy witnesses and tons of conspiracy theories.
A lot to unpack.
What else did the ARB dig up? They had to find something juicy in all those files.
Oh, they did. They did. One thing they found was a fingerprint.
A fingerprint?
Yeah, on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository.
Okay, hold on. That's where Oswald was, right?
Supposedly. Yeah.
So whose fingerprint was it?
It was matched to a guy named Mac Wallace.
Mac Wallace. Yeah, and the fingerprint had been missed initially.
Really?
Yeah, overlooked somehow, and later on, it was matched by a fingerprint expert,
Who was that?
A. Nathan Darby.
And this Mac Wallace, who was he?
Well, he had a pretty controversial past.
Like what?
Alleged ties to organized crime.
Oh, wow.
Even rumors about other murders he might have been involved in.
Okay, so are we talking about a second shooter here?
It's not that clear-cut.
How so?
Well, the fingerprint, it definitely added to the theories about Wallace,
yeah.
but there's no consensus on what his role was.
So some people think he was involved,
A key player, yeah,
and others think it was just a coincidence.
pretty much.
Wow. It's like another layer on top of everything else.
Exactly, just makes things more complicated.
You mentioned earlier that the ARRB found some stuff related to the autopsy, too.
Right.
What was that about?
One of the big things was a roll of undeveloped film.
Film?
Yeah, color film from the autopsy.
Hold on. So we might actually get better photos from the autopsy after all these years.
That's what they were hoping for.
That could change everything.
The autopsy photos have always been controversial.
Oh, yeah.
People questioning their authenticity and all that.
So this new film was a big deal.
It was.
So what happened? Did they develop it?
They did, and they decided to digitally enhance the existing photos and x-rays too.
Wow, using modern technology to try to get a clearer picture.
Exactly. They knew it might be their last chance to really see what happened.
So did they find anything groundbreaking?
It's hard to say for sure.
Oh, come on.
I know. But even with the enhancements, there are still going to be questions.
I guess that's true.
And then there were those restrictions on the autopsy materials.
Right, we talked about that before.
Did the ARB get full access?
Yeah, were they able to see everything?
They weren't, no.
Really? Why not?
Because of something called a donor deed of gift.
What's that?
It's basically an agreement, and in this case, it came from the Kennedy family.
Okay.
And it limited what could be released publicly.
So even though the JFK Act made all these records public,
Yeah.
the Kennedy family still had some say.
They did. It shows the tension between, like, government transparency and family privacy.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is.
The ARRB had to follow the law.
Right.
They couldn't just ignore the family's wishes.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even with their best efforts,
Yeah.
some information, it's just going to stay hidden.
That's frustrating.
It is. Okay, so we've got a new fingerprint, enhanced autopsy photos,
Right.
but we hit a wall with some materials.
What else did they find?
Well, they also found a plan for new forensic testing.
Testing.
Yeah, on a bullet fragment.
Bullet fragment. Where was it from?
It was recovered from the limo.
Oh, wow. And this testing was never done before?
It wasn't. The plan was actually recommended by the House Select Committee on Assassinations way back in '79.
The HSCA, that's the committee that reinvestigated the assassination in the late 70s, right?
That's the one.
Okay, so what kind of testing were they talking about? And why is this bullet fragment so important?
Well, the HSCA thought it could be crucial.
Really? Why?
It had some stuff stuck to it like fibrous plant debris.
Debris.
Yeah, and they thought that by analyzing it,
Mm-hmm.
they might be able to tell where the bullet came from.
Like what kind of plants it went through.
Maybe, or even the direction it was fired from.
So this fragment could potentially tell us something new about the trajectory. Maybe even challenge the idea that the shot came from the book depository.
It's possible.
Wow. Okay, so did they do the testing? What were the results?
That's where it gets a little frustrating.
Oh, no, don't tell me.
Remember, the ARRB was only temporary.
Right, they had a time limit.
By the time they found this plan and got things moving,
Yeah.
their time was almost up.
So they didn't get to do it.
They handed the fragment over to the FBI labs.
The FBI?
They were considered the best equipped for this type of analysis.
Okay.
And they planned to have independent observers there, too.
To make sure everything was above board.
Exactly. But unfortunately,
Wait.
the results weren't ready before the ARRB finished their work.
Are you serious? So we still don't know what the fragment could tell us?
Not yet.
Ugh, what a tease. Okay, so did they at least recommend how to handle things like this in the future?
They did. They realized they were dealing with a lot of unique challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And they wanted to make things easier for future investigations.
That's good.
One of their big recommendations was to make the Freedom of Information Act stronger.
FOIA, that's the law that lets people request government documents, right?
That's right.
Why did they think it needed to be stronger?
They found that the FOIA process is just not very efficient.
Really? How so?
Well, agencies could use loopholes
Oh, sneaky.
and create delays to avoid releasing information.
So even though they got the documents they needed,
Eventually,
it was a fight.
it was
So they were basically saying, hey, the system's broken.
pretty much.
We need to fix it.
Yeah, they wanted to streamline it.
Make it less prone to, like, manipulation.
Exactly, so that future investigations wouldn't have the same problems.
Makes sense. What else did they recommend?
They also had a pretty radical idea.
Oh, I like radical.
They suggested creating a permanent group for reviewing classified records.
A permanent group. So not like the ARRB, which was temporary.
Right, because they were always working against the clock.
Yeah.
And they argued that we need a dedicated, ongoing effort.
For transparency in government.
Exactly. Especially for events like the JFK assassination.
So like a watchdog group just focused on classified records. That's pretty bold.
It was a good idea.
Did it happen?
Not really. There wasn't enough political will to make it a reality.
Oh, so typical.
Right. People in power, they don't always want to give up their secrets.
Sadly, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, the recommendations.
Yeah.
But what about the documents themselves? What were some of the most interesting things they found?
Oh, there are some juicy ones.
You know, we've been talking about all these documents and recommendations. We have.
But I'm curious about the ARB itself.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we have audio recordings
We do.
of their discussions.
Yeah, they're internal discussions.
What can we learn from those?
Well, they're fascinating.
I bet.
You get to hear how they made decisions.
Like we're really in the room with them.
Kind of, yeah. You hear them debating the documents.
Okay.
Arguing about what should be released, what could be postponed,
That's just
even sharing their own opinions on the assassination.
So it wasn't just all business.
No, not at
Yeah.
all. They were dealing with the weight of history.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One discussion that stands out is about the cost of declassification.
Oh, yeah. Money always comes into play.
It does. The ARB knew processing millions of pages was going to be expensive,
Right.
but they were committed to transparency.
So how did they balance that?
Money versus openness.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's a classic dilemma, and you can hear them going back and forth,
Really?
weighing the costs, the benefits, trying to be thorough, but also efficient. So, like, practical considerations, too.
Exactly.
Wow, I never would have thought about that.
It's interesting, right?
It is. It really shows how seriously they took this whole thing.
Yeah.
Not just finding the truth, but also being responsible with,
Taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
It's impressive.
Okay, so budget debates, anything else stand out from the recordings? Any of the board members have strong opinions?
There's a part where Dr. Anna Nelson,
Oh, yeah, her.
she talks about the nitty-gritty work.
What does she mean?
She's talking about the ARRB staff, the people who actually spent hours going through the documents.
Doing the grunt work?
Basically, yeah, tedious, repetitive tasks.
Yeah. It's easy to forget about that part.
It is a lot of historical research, especially on this scale.
Yeah.
It's not glamorous.
Not at all. It makes you realize this whole deep dive, it's
Yeah.
not just about JFK.
Right.
It's about the process of finding the truth.
Which can be messy.
Yeah. And even with the best intentions, a dedicated team,
It's not always perfect.
it can still be incomplete.
That's very true.
You're right.
The JFK assassination, it's a perfect example of how history is rarely neat and tidy.
And we may never have all the answers.
Probably not.
But the ARRB, they did get us closer.
They did. They gave us so much information,
But they set an example for transparency in government.
which is so important.
Yeah, hopefully it inspires more of that.
I hope so.
It's like they gave us all the pieces of a huge puzzle,
Yeah,
but they couldn't put it together for us.
that's our job.
It is. And
Yeah.
we have to deal with the ambiguity, the conflicting evidence, the fact that some things might always be hidden.
That's the nature of it.
It is, and honestly, that's what makes it so fascinating.
Absolutely.
It's up to us, the listeners, to go through it all.
Yeah.
Draw our own conclusions, maybe find something new.
Who knows? Maybe someone listening right now
Yeah.
will find the missing piece.
The one that changes everything.
It could happen.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive.
Into the ARRB.
But like we said, the conversation doesn't end here.
Keep it going.
We encourage you to check out the documents yourselves.
Yeah.
There are great resources out there. The Mary Farrell Foundation.
The ARB's website.
Dive in, be curious.
Ask questions.
Because even after all these
It is
years,
a JFK assassination.
it keeps us thinking
It does.
and searching for the truth.
Wherever it may lead.